I will begin very shortly because you've come on time. Makes a change to some people, I guess.
We're very keen.
You're keen, good, because you're going to learn a lot today. It's going to be quite quick.
Just don't say anything interesting for the first 5 minutes.
Don't say anything interesting. I'm going to start with the most interesting bits because, that's what the people who come early get. Free cannabis, yes. There may be some free gifts.
And then the rest of the talk becomes like super woozy.
You may forget the talk though if you have that. It's apparently part of the thing. Can everyone hear me okay? How's the sound? The sound is good? Okay, great. Right, so we're in a chapel here today. So today I suggest let's pray. Let's pray to the plant Cannabis sativa. So I respect the plant Cannabis sativa. It is one of my strongest allies, and I welcome it here today to support this conversation of exploring cannabis as a psychedelic. So we're going to learn a bunch of things today, which includes how cannabis actually affected my life personally. We're going to talk a little bit about the mental health issue that we have here in Australia. We're going to learn a bit about the history of cannabis. We're going to learn what a cannabis psychedelic experience is. Okay? We're going to be really clear on that today. We're going to learn why cannabis is the first legal, widely accessible cannabis psychedelic in Australia. We're going to talk about what can go wrong, and we're also going to talk about how you can actually advertise for psychedelic therapy using cannabis today in Australia, how it's completely legal. And of course there'll be time for questions and answers, depending on how we get. So the process, I'm going to start with the best bits, but just very briefly, the process for cannabis psychedelics is like any other psychedelic medicine. So it starts with preparation, it includes very strong set and setting, there is an actual psychedelic experience in the middle of it, there's very much a grounding experience that comes after, there's some integration, and then there's some more integration. So that's the general process that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about why cannabis is the gentlest of all psychedelics, why cannabis is the only psychedelic where you have the agency to leave the psychedelic experience, so it's nothing like anyone else. How you can have a psychedelic therapy session for under $1,000 legally here in Australia. And as I said, how it's legal to practice and advertise that in Australia today. So these are the kind of things you're going to understand more about why they exist. My psychedelic journey provided me such a deep healing, found was able to shine light on some shadows, traumas, deep-seated traumas, became aware of some unconscious patterns that were playing out in my life, and I left feeling empowered, strong, brave, lighter. This is some of the experiences that people get. And when people ask me, what does a cannabis psychedelic experience feel like? Do I get stoned? These are literally words that people have come and shared with me after an experience. It came on as strong as ayahuasca. It has visuals similar to DMT. I gained deep insight through memories, and it's changed my life forever. So we're going to learn why that's the case. But before we do, we're going to start with the mental health problem around the world. Now, anxiety and depression affects over 500 million people worldwide, which is not a few people. It's a very serious issue that we have to look at globally. And the mental health challenges that we face are very significant with depression, anxiety, PTSD. In fact, 33% of US people have both a mental health condition and substance abuse together. There's a significant issue that we have in society. So let's not pretend that we're working in a nice, beautiful bubble like we are here today, and with wonderful awake people. Most of the people in America are bad in terms of having mental health issues and substance abuse. And Australia's not much better. In fact, 43% of the Australian population has experienced some kind of mental disorder in their lifetime. That's nearly 1 in 2 people in Australia. It's not small. And, but I'm not sure how that's measured. Mental health issues within Australia are challenging because I've actually met a number of lost souls in Australia, and I'm not sure how lost they are. I think they're simply waking up and realizing that everyone else is like following, what they're told to do, waking up 9 to 5, going to their job, doing the things that they've been programmed to do, and going, that's not right anymore. So sometimes they feel lost in that. I'm not saying that's the case for everybody, but I think we really do need to look at what mental health means. Now, before I continue, I wanted to share a little bit about my journey. I grew up in middle-class London. I was told no drugs are bad for you. But I did actually smoke and inhale the substance when I was about 15 years old for the first time. It wasn't long after before I had my first LSD trip. And these experiences changed me forever. I definitely would never have been the same after these experiences, and I saw a different way of living. In fact, I moved into more of an anti-establishment kind of mentality, where everything about the government was bad, everything was a conspiracy theory, and I was a rebel against everything. This is what happens as a young teenager, and then I discovered magic mushrooms. And in London, in the forest, they grow everywhere, so I spent my time consuming magic mushrooms, and then that led me to understanding a little bit more about what psychedelics are. And in London in the 90s, people took me to raves and showed me what MDMA and ecstasy do when you open your heart and you're all together looking at one particular thing, and how amazing and interesting that can be. So all of those things led to me leaving school early. This was me on my last day at school in about 16, and I said, no, I'm clever, Ray, you've told me I'm going to have really good exams, I don't need to finish them. So instead I went to beautiful islands like this and decided to go and have a party on islands like this and consume lots of drugs. But it didn't last very long. For me, personally, I lasted about a week on a beautiful island before I learned meditation. And I learned Vipassana literally by stumbling on it, going, I don't know what Vipassana, I didn't know what meditation was. But I went to one of these places, 10 days later, I changed the person again. But I never gave up the consumption of cannabis throughout this period. It certainly affected me and led me to actually connecting with people from indigenous people of northeast Thailand on the Mekong River, where they never spoke any languages, but I learned a number of things. I learned about community, living together. I learned about being in harmony with nature and eating food in the best way possible. I also learned about some of the other substances they may have consumed there, such as opiates, and thankfully I didn't realise I didn't have an addictive personality, even though in these countries people were consuming opiates and from the day they were born until they were 80 and never had any problem. So I did learn what I'd been told, that opiates were really bad for you, or only bad if you don't have access to them, which then they become very bad. So I'm not saying they're good at all whatsoever, and then I didn't consume them again since, sadly. As a 19-year-old boy, this is me reading The Psychedelic Experience. So I do actually have proof that I was into psychedelics at 19, and way before that actually. In fact, I grew up in London with people like Terence McKenna, and I read books from Shorgin. I really studied Ken Kesey, Crowley, Tibetan Book of the Dead, and all these other subjects. But most of my time was spent travelling through Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia also, until I made it to Goa on a motorbike, travelling through the country for 3.5 months, where I really connected with, the indigenous traditional people. I wasn't interested in the tourist places, and this journey was fueled with not so many microdoses, more macrodoses of mushrooms, LSD, and cannabis. And part of that experience led me to having not the best experiences ever. So I actually learned what a bad trip can be. And that, in retrospect, gave me a lot of insight into who I am and who I'm not, actually, and what I shouldn't be doing in my life. So I had to spend a lot of time integrating, and I integrated by travelling throughout all the ley lines in Great Britain. So that's England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. I spent 2 years literally living between either festivals or ley lines, going to sit with where these ancient things have happened. I eventually got to New Zealand, where I also was consuming LSD, and I was turning lots of people on, like I thought that was a great thing to do, until my girlfriend's mum dogged me into the police, the next door neighbour, and I had my passport taken away, learning more lessons about the legalities. Had no idea what these experiences meant at the time. Hopefully they'll make sense to you if you keep listening. And then I went to Canada. Canada is a place, and this is a very side note, jumping a bit to later, that has a $4.5 billion cannabis industry today. Now, Canada's not that much bigger than Australia. Australia has caught up really quickly recently to have a $500 million industry, but the point being is that cannabis is still going to be growing in this country as time goes on. Anyway, I met a hippie that looked not too different like this, and he told me about the food benefits of hemp or cannabis sativa seed, and particularly the omega-3 and omega-6 content of hemp seed, and I realised that was extremely important for human nutrition. Now, before we continue, cannabis. What is cannabis? Is it hemp? Is it marijuana? What do they mean? Cannabis is the Latin name, it's the genus of this plant. There are two types of cannabis. One, generally, the one is very low THC, one is very high THC. THC is the psychoactive bit that makes you feel high, we'll say. Both are, as I said, part of the same plant. This plant has an outside fiber, it has an inside sheath, it has leaves, it has seeds, it has flowers, it has roots, and they can all be used for thousands of different uses. And that's one of the things that really interested me about this plant, its sustainability and the many options that can be made from it. Because I was interested in food and nutrition from my time in Thailand and watching how these vibrant, healthy-looking people who felt so strong, they lived in shit. All the things I was told literally not to do, like you must wash your hands before you go to the toilet and all these things, they didn't do any of that stuff, but they had an immune system that was strong. And I believe it was because of food, because of essential fatty acids. So when I discovered hemp contained these ingredients, I said, I'm going to help and change the world and help everybody sell hemp products. But no one was doing it. So I developed my own hemp food bar. This food bar, bottom line, was the first hemp food bar created in the UK, in Europe, and sold 300 million bars eventually, became very successful. Then I went and made a hemp ice cream, and this is how I literally travelled around the UK in festivals, looking like that, basically telling people how they can eat hemp soups, hemp breads, hemp foods of all time, and explaining to them why it's so great, until I was headhunted to come to this wonderful country of Australia. Australia, all these beautiful things I was told was like, great, another blank slate, I can turn these people onto hemp foods. It took me 3 years before what I got. No hemp, no way. So I found myself in this amazing country, and actually I'll come back to this in a minute, it took 17 years for me to change the legislation working in this country. So in the meantime, what was I going to do? Well, I still loved the plant, and I still had a big effect with the plant, so it told me to make bioplastics. So I decided they hated plastics from what I'd seen in Asia, and instead of seeing this waste all around the world, I'd use this amazing plant to actually get rid of all these fossil fuels. So I made all these different hemp plants. In fact, hemp plastics, this is the first hemp plastic since Henry Ford ever brought up the idea of using hemp in plastic. So I still work and have a company making that today. And that's another 100% hemp items. There was a didgeridoo here yesterday being played with these items, made out of this material made from 100% hemp. So meanwhile, as I said, I was waiting a long time in Australia for hemp to be legal, so what was I going to do? I wrote 15 books because I was bored, basically. But eventually, 17 years came around, I didn't know how long it was going to be, and what happened? Well, finally, even though the company was born in 1999, I was on the news saying, yes, it's finally legal in 2017. So now you can buy hemp seeds everywhere, and it's all available, which is great. So now we actually grow hemp cannabis in a much bigger scale. This is a type of cannabis kind of scale and field that we grow in. You can see how big it is. So, it started off in my back garden, and I don't know how it happened, but it got this big. So all of these kind of fields of cannabis. So my son was brought up in these fields. But really, we're doing hemp foods. That's what we made and we focused on. But then I made hemp skincare products, and I made hemp CBD products, the first company in Australia, one of the first in the US, in fact. And I grew that idea because someone said this is good for epilepsy. I met the kids that did that, so I thought, okay, let's try that and do it in my way, led by the plant. Ended up listing after 2 years on the ASX for $100 million. And eventually I grew that business to a $600 million market cap company, where I met with the First Lady of Japan, who's in Times Square on the London Underground, on stage in Tokyo, talking about cannabis and hemp. So this is a long-haired hippie guy that you saw earlier, just like, oh, okay, I'm in a different world now. So even working with pets, okay, and I got to fly first class even because I'm doing it really well, and I thought, well, I've got a laboratory with 160 people. What else do you do when they're giving you things to try? Well, I took them all on first class planes and don't recommend psychedelics on when you're flying high. Anyway, I'm still working with cannabis today in different forms. I created using different cannaverins, which is a part of the cannabis plant, to make weight loss products and sleep products, and we can again talk about, it's not what we're here to talk about today. My point being that even though I had super powerful experiences like DMT and 5-MeO-DMT, The plant for me is cannabis because it has been my friend and my boss throughout my journey, and it has really led me to where I am, and it is the spirit of that plant that is the reason why I'm here today. So again, to summarize what I'm about to say here, this is the history in one page. 4,000 years, cannabis was the most, or 5,000 years, 6,000 years, the most important commodity on this planet. 85 years, it was the most persecuted plant, and now it's the most important commodity again. So again, we really have to put this into perspective. Cannabis has been built with us, for us, and I'll explain more about what I mean by that. But let's go to history. 4,000 years ago, Egyptians actually had pictures of cannabis plants, talked about cannabis being used. The British naval ships who were going all around the world, taking over the world, raping and pillaging, doing all the naughty things that they did, they couldn't have done that without hemp, so they needed 80 tons of hemp for each ship being used. That was replaced every 3 to 4 years, required 320 acres of hemp. Guess what? England is not a very large place. They didn't have enough hemp. So where did they come? Well, Sir Joseph Banks is the Royal Botanist in the UK, and he said, Australia's a good idea. So they sent 11 convict ships, because they're sending all their prisoners here, if you remember. And they thought, while we're sending the prisoners, let's send some cannabis seeds. And they actually got Australia to grow cannabis in 1788. So that's a bit of Australian history for you about cannabis. I thought you learned something here today. India also has a massive history of cannabis. 3,000 years old. In the Vedas it was mentioned. Shiva basically represents cannabis over there. The Egyptians, the mummies have it, sometimes it was put with the mummies, and they found literally traces of cannabis hashish in mummies. The Chinese emperor in the Pharmacopoeia, 2800 BC, it was mentioned by Emperor Shang Nung mentioned that. But the Romans are the most interesting story for me, because they actually used cannabis as a psychedelic. So they would come in a room like this, like it's a church, so why not? You close the door, so close the door, and they would make a little space in the middle, they would put coals there, make a little fire, chuck big bales of cannabis, high THC in it, let it all smoke up, and guess what would happen? They would all have a psychedelic experience. So that is literally written down about the Romans, and I learned that, I was very happy. So the modern stigma of cannabis is very real though, so let's just be honest and clear about that. Mainly because the Marijuana Tax Act made it illegal, there was a war on drugs, it was called the gateway drug theory, which is no research actually ever made that true whatsoever. It was a completely made up PR exercise, but it did impact research and it did change attitudes to be bad. And it was because of these kind of videos and campaigns called the Reefer Madness campaign that is really sad.
Innocently they dance. Innocent of a new and deadly menace lurking behind closed doors. Marijuana, the burning weed with its roots in hell.
I don't look like that generally, I think. Anyway, that's the old stigma. And it was the counterculture revival that actually changed things. So for me, it was Ken Kesey and his bus of merry pranksters that travelled around, turning people on to psychedelics that actually started changing the attitudes to all of these things. And then legislation more recently has begun to change. Netherlands was the first to decriminalise, not legalise. So cannabis is not legal, actually, in Amsterdam, even though there's all those coffee shops there. Decriminalised in 1976. Colorado did the first thing by actually fully going to rec in 2012. And Thailand also did that very recently in 2022, Germany in 2024, and Australia in 2016. So Australia did really quite well with cannabis legislation. So therefore the laws for cannabis, ketamine, psilocybin, you can see these are the first psychedelics to be legalised in Australia, with cannabis being the first in 2016, ketamine in 2021, and then psilocybin and MDMA, as you're aware, just recently last year. So again, let's go into the actual plant itself. So let me give you some botany and some experiences about what cannabis is. Cannabis is a genus containing 3 subspecies. There's Cannabis sativa, Cannabis indica, and Cannabis ruderalis. So there's 3 different types. They're all generally known for their THC or CBD. They're the major cannabinoids that people talk about. What I prefer to say though is that there is no such thing as sativa. There is no such thing as indica. They are 2 ends of a spectrum. When you talk about sativa or broadleaf, I prefer to say, because it's a fatter leaf on that plant, there's a broadleaf dominant product and there's a narrowleaf dominant product. But it's a grey scale. There is nothing black or white about this. So again, modern way of communicating about
Let's talk about
cannabis.
marijuana and your brain.
From
It's a
CNN.
rather complicated process, so let's start off with what's familiar to you. THC. THC is the chemical in weed that gets you high. You feel lightheaded, feel giddy, sometimes relaxed. Marijuana, you can smoke it, you can eat it in an extract of food, you can inhale it in a vapor pen, or consume it in an oil form. It's especially good for little kids who are taking it as a medicine.
It's good for little kids. So when CNN says cannabis is good for little kids, that stigma that we've talked about earlier is changing. So let's talk about how it works. It actually works on the main CB1 and CB2 receptors. So our bodies are built with an endocannabinoid system. That means every one of us here today is built in harmony with the cannabis plant. That is undisputed, and it's new medicine, it's newly understood. Many doctors don't yet understand this. Most CB1 and 2 receptors are in your brain, but they're in every organ in your body, and they're actually designed to create homeostasis, which is why you get very different effects from cannabis for different people. But they work for different things like pain, memory, movement, appetite, metabolism. They affect immunity and cardiopulmonary functions, so many different things. They also work on the serotonin 2A receptor. So that is the same receptor and affects the same receptor that all psychedelics act upon. So that's hence why cannabis has very similar effects from a psychedelic basis. So people ask me, what's the difference between cannabis or marijuana, hemp, medical cannabis, recreational cannabis? The point here is there is no difference. It is one plant. I said that at the beginning. I'll say it again. It is one plant. How you use it, like how you go about anything in your life, is depending on the intention and what you want to use it for. Medical cannabis and recreational cannabis, it's irrelevant. If you're taking something recreational, whether it's coffee or alcohol, you're taking it recreationally, but you're actually taking it for medical reasons because you need that. If you abuse it, that's the difference. And you can abuse any substance on this planet, even water. And we'll come to water in a second. But there are many chemicals. There are even 400 plus molecules in cannabis. And they're still being discovered regularly. And they have all of these different uses for different medical reasons. So again, it's a very complex plant. People ask, what's the whole plant extract? I've heard about the entourage effect. Well, the entourage effect means that it's not just THC that gets you high. As you saw in that CNN article, that's how they summarize it to the public. And that's what most doctors even believe today. And when you go and buy cannabis, the most common question for a dispensary serving cannabis, when people say, what do you want? Can I have the highest THC? Well, I can assure you, if you take a 30% THC product and a 15% THC product, you can get way higher on a 15% THC product. Not always, but sometimes. And that's because of the entourage effect, which is basically all about terpenes, flavonoids, esters, and alcohols within the plant. And all of those things work very much differently to affect you in different ways. Now, terpenes, let's start with those. Terpenes are the things that make things smell. So flowers smell, roses smell, a lemon smells. So a lemon smells of limonene, that's the terpene. Mango is myrcene predominant. Beta-carotene is what you get from cloves. So there's all these different terpenes, and I'm not going to go detailed into them all today, but they all have very different effects on how you feel. So how you consume cannabis? Well, people know that there's flowers, and then there's oils, and then there's hash, and resin, and edibles, and topicals. This is one of the first vaporizers ever created in Amsterdam. This is one of the first smoking devices from Sanus in India. And this is a more modern device here on the left side here, vaporizing. They're all forms of consuming the cannabis. Now, how you consume the cannabis depends on how much terpenes and all those whole plant extracts that you consume. How it was created into an edible or an oil or a distillate all depends on how it was made. So those things are not communicated really easily or well these days. So my recommendation to most people is to choose the freshest, cleanest flower that you can have access to. And you'll be quite surprised that the medical doctor from UCLA Pulmonary Function Laboratory says several previous studies confirm that marijuana smoking has protective effect on the lungs. Okay, so this is for people who say smoking cannabis or smoking is bad. Smoking is not good. I am not recommending smoking, do not recommend smoking in any way. I actually recommend vaping cannabis, which is a lower temperature form of consuming or imbibing, because that's the best way to get all of those micro ingredients, we're talking about the terpenes and the flavonoids, into your body. So I'm not promoting smoking, but I am promoting that cannabis is safe. On all of the fatal poisonings, the highest poisonings, of course, are anxiety and depression drugs. More people die from that than any other drug known to man. On the bottom of the list is synthetic cannabinoids. I do not recommend synthetic cannabinoids. Plant-based cannabinoids obviously don't go there, because there are no deaths from cannabis ever. No one has ever died from taking cannabis. Now, when I'm offering a psychedelic experience, to say to somebody that no one has died from this is actually quite relaxing for me, at least to hear that. It's like, okay, so the worst that can happen is, well, not death, which is kind of quite good for me. So I say, well, great, so dive in. So if you feel like you're going to die, you can really let go into those feelings. So it's actually a way to support people. Now, that's what a professor emeritus of psychiatry from Harvard says, but why would we listen to him? Why wouldn't we listen to a doctor who promotes, the Australian Medical Association say real cannabis is not safe? So, I don't know how people get to say these things with no backup or no research, but we will move on, shall we? Especially when the science papers show that there are many benefits for pain relief, reduction of anxiety, sleep, neuroprotectiveness, and reducing nausea. Now, before I'm going to get into the cannabis psychedelic part of this very shortly, but so you understand how I've got a little bit of experience on understanding psychedelic protocols is because I set up a company called Delica to actually produce psilocybin in Australia, which is what it does today. So we produce legal psilocybin in Australia, and I did that with some amazing people, where I brought on to my board, for example, Bruce, who ran Janssen, which is head of Johnson & Johnson in this part of the world for 37 years. Had other great people like Chairman David Hoff. David was the only person to legalize a psychedelic on the planet, an actual psychedelic drug, which is S-ketamine. James Rucker from the Imperial College London. So I got to work with these people and all their friends, and it was an amazing experience to learn what a true psychedelic protocol was, which led me to recognizing that cannabis is a true psychedelic. There was no question about that. So I've been asked this a number of times, what actually is a psychedelic? How can you say cannabis is a psychedelic, Paul? Well, I absolutely can, because I look in the Oxford English Dictionary. I'm an English person. What describes drugs that induce changes of levels of consciousness in mind? There are many different definitions of cannabis. Even there's a psychedelic effects of cannabis review of literature with hundreds of papers, which all say that the available evidence suggests that high THC cannabis may be able to elicit psychedelic drugs. So even from a science-based perspective, this is correct. I like to define it in this way. And it's because it comes from the Greek word psych and delic. The other company we call Delica, putting those two things together, which basically means mind manifesting. And this is what these substances do. They offer us an opportunity to actually manifest things in this planet. And we'll come back to that, as I mentioned, integration being a big part of this later on. So, again, more benefits of medical cannabis. We talked about a few of these earlier. Because of growing up with natural foods, health and wellness, I've made it a really important part of my journey to ensure that wellness is incorporated within a psychedelic experience. That means that's why I moved away from Delica. I don't want to run trials within a laboratory or within a hospital. And I see the benefits and I support people doing that. But for me personally, I wanted to use all the health tools that I have. So it includes all the biohacking tools that I've learned. So I'll come back to that shortly. I mentioned this is the actual process of cannabis psychedelic experience. Very similar to any psychedelic drug. It starts with preparation. The preparation, if you're going to ever have a psychedelic experience, a true one with cannabis, your preparation has begun because you've listened to this. So you already have some preconceived ideas that may be going through your mind, and hopefully a lot of your questions will be answered through this process. But that's where it starts. And that moves on to actually creating goals and intentions for the actual experience, which ultimately gets to the set and setting of the space. So actually, before I move to that, In the preparation side, we start with a medical intake form designed by psychotherapists and doctor friends of mine to actually get a picture of who the person is. I want to understand who the person is from a physiological perspective, mental perspective, spiritual perspective, and that ultimately comes better through a form, but better when I meet them in person. So once we've gone through that preparation, I've led that person into setting their intentions and their goals for that experience. I bring them into, that's their mindset. They're already being brought into, okay, I'm coming into this experience, I'm really clear about what it will be in terms of the process, and I'm ready to let go. And the clearer people are, the more that they can let go. And in the underground movement, that's a little bit challenging to have communications back and forth before an experience, which is one of the reasons I like cannabis as a psychedelic, is because I get to communicate openly by email. I don't have to go through signal groups and all this. I can talk about that cannabis experience, what may or may not happen, and how people can be supported. So with a positive mindset and a clear intention of what that experience is going to bring, we come into the setting. And for me, a setting is a comfortable space. So, I probably will do it where there's soft surroundings. I have a sound bed in my room. I have a nice amethyst mat. I have soft couches. I don't have any pictures of, or in a chapel, Christ or Buddha, and I'm not saying I don't believe in any of those things, or you need to believe in any of those things. The point is it needs to be a non-denominational space. So we move from that into the experience. So I'm going into this overview, but I realise I have lots of slides all about these things. So first impressions, we talked about creating their mindset, medical intake, getting a worldview picture from that person, and the contraindications. And the contraindications, let me go into those. So what does cannabis not work with? Well, to start with, cannabis is safer than water. Okay, that is a clear statement that I stick behind. The science, if you want to be based on science, if you want to be based on facts, cannabis is literally safer than water. There's a blog post there and you can see all the references to why that is. But cannabis does not work with pregnancy. Why? Because it hasn't been studied enough with people who are pregnant. It also doesn't work, in my opinion, for people aged 21 and over, because there is evidence showing that brain development does not complete till between 18 and there's some different responses saying 21 to 23, 25 even, potentially. So, now, I'm not strict on that because sometimes there are people already consuming large amounts of cannabis and their parents say, please can you give this person a respectful connection to this plant. So there are sometimes where I will treat people under 21, but generally it's 21 plus. Bipolar is another example where it's not an ideal way to take people into their healing, and they probably need more professional support rather than a psychedelic experience. And the same with the cardiovascular disease, because that is not understood clearly. But ultimately, when choosing whether someone is appropriate for cannabis psychedelic experience, it is the discernment of the facilitator. It's the one-on-one connection that we cannot be changed. We will have questions at the end.
I just wanted to add to that.
Yep.
Transplant patients.
Which ones?
Transplant
patients, exactly. That's not a definitive list, just to be clear. I do supply a much more detailed list in our course materials, but that is just an example. Transplant patients, again, is someone, again, that's hence the discernment part of it as well, because it's never ending, it's not black and white. None of these things generally are, except sometimes it's just a no. So as I mentioned, it's the initial interview with that person where I'll understand. And some people will may have great questions, but not answer them fully and openly. And when you actually read in between the lines, you find out some information about people. So it coming with a really clear mindset into the experience is very important, as we mentioned earlier. Coming into that peaceful setting where people feel comfortable, where they are not feeling that this is making them have to believe in a certain way or do a certain thing. And then the actual experience day is, like all psychedelic experiences, built around ritual. Ritual is an ancient technology, we'll say, that brings people very much in line with a particular way of moving. So I use ritual, particularly earth-based rituals, using the directions, using the fire, earth, water, air, different aspects that are universal. So I'll only work with any things that are universal to all of us in all cultures. On the day, we certainly use mindfulness techniques. Now, mindfulness techniques is something that is very strong and very important for all our facilitators to be clear in themselves, so they are non-reactive in all experiences, whatever may happen. So mindfulness is one part that the facilitator must be qualified in, but also we support the client in being mindful and coming into their somatic feeling selves before they move into the actual experience itself. With cannabis, because it is a gentle psychedelic, and I say gentle, I mentioned at the earlier that people are saying that, you know, that how it comes on as strong as ayahuasca, has visuals like DMT, and has deep trauma relief. So it can be quite powerful as well, but for some people it can be also gentle, which means you can turn that up or down using technologies. Breathwork being one of those technologies. But I also like my Psychedelics. So this is a sound bed, like the vibe bed that we have outside here. But we also use sound and the technology around sound and frequencies, and also use light frequencies. I use things like transcranial direct current stimulators. So using all of the most modern tools that we can to support the turning up and down of that experience. And as I mentioned earlier, cannabis is the only psychedelic where you have, as a client, the agency to leave the experience. So during the experience, one person is often laying on a sound bed with an eye mask on, and they're going through this deep experiential journey. But with cannabis, I make sure that people, one, feel comfortable that have the agency to leave the psychedelic experience, but I want to give them that experience. So I make sure that we have a break an hour after the experience where people take their blindfold off. I call it a toilet break, but really it's an opportunity for someone to go, oh, I can walk to the toilet. Now I'm here in my body again, that's right. I was just off the universe, and then, like, now come back to the universe again. I don't use those words, of course, but we guide them back to go back deeply into that experience so that they can see that it is so safe and gentle in that way. And that is this medicine, which is very unlike any other. And again, yeah, these are the comments that have come to me very specifically from different clients. So it is not, it's gentle on one hand, but can be absolutely deep and profound as any other psychedelic on the other hand. Which means that it's really important to do the things that are required for all psychedelics, which starts with grounding after the experience. So I really support people going through all of the integration-based experiences. For me, grounding in nature, as I said, I like to work in harmony with nature, is really important for me. I also like to work with journaling technologies. So people moving straight into journaling immediately after the experience and having further integration sessions later on. Because right now, everyone's interested in these, you know, this is a great cartoon to explain my fact here. Is like, you know, everyone's like, yeah, let's try that one. I haven't tried that one. It's like, okay, but how about integrate that last one first? And we can do that through wonderful ways like somatic body work and many other things and tools that I'm not going to talk about today because there's so many of them. But what I do want to say is that I come from, you know, I spent a bit of time in Ireland, so Murphy, he's always around, I find. So always preparing for the worst is what this says to me, because we are humans. We are not yet perfect. We are not the AI robot machines that we are. So actually having really strong ethics and integrity built into a process is absolutely critical. And the first task for all of my team is actually safety. So safety for the client and safety for oneself is absolutely the highest priority and is incorporated in everything that I do. And I can set those bars and I can say this is absolutely required to be part of a facility, to be a trained facilitator, which sadly is not yet easily available on the underground, which is why I recommend all drugs be decriminalised. And I fully support all drugs being decriminalised, so it can be safety, can be an official, not just an underground conversation and all the wonderful people here, of course, talking about safety, but I would like that to be absolutely clear and not a choice to be. But cannabis is safe, and in fact, Dr. Etho Rustin says it's the single most versatile herbal remedy and the most useful plant on earth. No other single plant contains a wide range of medically active herbal constituents, which is really important to hear for me, and I think a really important thing that, again, we're talking about one plant here that makes textiles and clothing, it makes food for us to consume, it makes fuel for our vehicles, it makes plastic to make things and wrap things in, and it's a medicine that can give us a true psychedelic alternative experience of our consciousness and who we actually are, which can connect us with nature and bring about so many things. So I think I'm dedicated to supporting people to experience cannabis in all of its different forms. Now, while we're on safety, I want to ask us, is living safe? So when we talk about is living safe, just by being here today, I don't want to bring negativity to the world, but there are 3 top likelihoods of human extinction. One of them nuclear war, one of them climate change, and apparently the third top one is artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence, even though it may be one of the most dangerous things on the planet potentially, I think it's a very useful tool. And just like anything, we can use or abuse anything. We can use or abuse our connection with nature, we can use or abuse plants, and we can use or abuse artificial intelligence. I believe in the good for it. So I have brought up my new child called Sativa. Sativa is a psychedelic trained artificial intelligence bot. So I have fed it with every book I could find on psychotherapy, emotional intelligence, somatics, everything, all the doctor's books that I could find on every psychedelic drug, and certainly cannabis and hemp as well. I tried to teach it about empathy and to be more of a conscious plant. So it is available for free to everybody to use, so I'm hoping the more people interact with it, it's still a very baby, just to be clear.
You have an AI bot called Sativa.
I have created an AI bot called Sativa that is free for everybody to use. Say again?
Is it similar to ChatGPT?
It's similar to ChatGPT, where you can go and have a chat to it and you can say, hey, I'm thinking about doing a plant medicine ceremony, what do I need to consider? Or it's like, I've heard, this guy told me that terpenes are really important. What terpenes do this? Or what terpenes do that? You can ask it anything, literally. It is very, very well trained on many, many millions of books, or millions of characters at least. And it is pretty good. So anyway, you let me know. It is online, and I'll give you a link to it after. It's available from my website, so I highly recommend it. So again, to summarise all the things that we've been talking about, cannabis psychedelics offers an altered perception of our reality and where we're at. It offers an altered sense of time. It offers potentially enhanced creativity. You may have euphoria feelings through this, and it may lead to trauma resolution and spiritual experiences. These are all possibilities. Nothing is guaranteed. We're all unique, and we all have our different experiences. The point is that I get to communicate about this in public. And I know everyone else, many people are here are doing that at a psychedelic conference. It's very easy to do. I can actually do this on television. I can have an advert for promoting psychedelic therapy. And I think that's really the consciousness that we've learned from all of these experiences. We need to know that these are very real experiences. We all know, I'm sure if you've had a psychedelic, you know how real it is. But you know that this is going to be moving to the mainstream, and that is the point. So, again, we mentioned one testimonial of one experience earlier. Here's another one that's worth reading just to you to get an idea of the kind of experiences people have. So this is a psychotherapist interested in the healing potentials of psychoactive plants in general. And they recently experienced a cannabis psychedelic session. And she's had many psychedelic experiences with powerful insights, but often are harsh on the nervous system and physical body. She had some preconceived ideas around cannabis, a feeling associated with being stoned or spacey. But there was nothing in that there was nothing like that. It was clear, vibrant, and offered clear visuals that guided her through her intentions, and allowing her to have agency to keep in certain visuals or move out as needed. So you can literally play with the psychedelic experience in that form. And she thinks it had a great value for many mental health diagnoses. I promise you I don't write these things. These are just some, and there are many on the website of real people, and you can meet the people if you want to speak with them.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
One is, unless you have questions at the end.
We'll have questions at the end, yes. Well, very, very shortly as well. So I'm going to give lots of time for questions because this is a discussion. This is something new to actually see cannabis as a true psychedelic. So now I want to talk about before we get to the questions, I like to make some controversy in my world and a few industries that I'm going to talk about. But we'll start with science and academia, okay? This is the former editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine, okay? Yeah? What did she say? It is simply no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that she's just published in one of the world's most prestigious journals, or to rely on the judgments of trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I reached slowly and reluctantly over my 2 decades as an editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. That's a serious statement against academia, full stop. Now, I am not against all of academia, but the point being is that you can trust it like you can the government, like you can McDonald's or the business or Monsanto. You can trust it about the same level. So I am going to talk a little bit about this business of psychedelics. So I'm going to talk about, that's academia. Government does the same. They make things that are promises and that a lot of people believe in, and they believe that they're right. Professionals, and that's all the doctors, the psychotherapists, the psychiatrists, they think they're all right. The underground world thinks they're all right. We all think we're right because we all think we're doing the best thing. The perspective is what is good or bad. Now, I'm not saying don't listen to any of these people. I am saying that be discerning. Choose what you believe in. Go into the depths. And that's so hard that with the rise of social media recently, in the last 10 years, 20 years, the change in how most people see things is phenomenal. And I'm interested in psychology and marketing, so I watch. And if you don't get a message across in 3 seconds, you've generally lost people. And the problem is, in 3 seconds, I can say anything, and it seems most people believe the first 3 seconds. So I could be making it completely up. Now, the thing is, people who write scientific journals are not 3 seconds. They also make it up, it seems. And they don't make it up per se, but they twist the facts. And, I've trained some of the best chief financial officers in this country, and I've watched them read books on how to influence data. So I've been chairman of a public company. I've been out there doing the right thing, telling the facts, following the laws, but following the laws with a little, slant. Look over here, don't look over there. It's like a magician. Look at this hand, not what I'm doing over here. That is not really why we need to follow everything that we see in 3 seconds. So we do need to go deeper into these things. And that is why, what is behind all of these things? What is the problem? And this is something I would really like to do an hour's talk on, and I'll talk for a little bit longer. We have a little bit of time, thankfully. But what I'm saying is, maybe there's a problem with all of these major systems that we've relied on and they're not all bad. I'm not saying everyone's bad, but I'm saying we've relied on them. Why have they become bad? Any ideas?
Money.
Yeah! I call it capitalism, this system here. It's money. It is the underlying problem to everything that I've ever seen on this planet. Now again, I'm not saying money is bad. We need something greedy, that's getting better. That's getting deeper to the underlying problem of capitalism. Because capitalism is the best solution we have as humanity today. Apparently, it's everywhere. You can't deny it because everyone uses it. Everyone here is in the capitalist system, and everyone here uses it right now. So you can say something else is better, well fucking go and live it, is what I say to you. Go live that then, because I can't see anyone else not in that society, unless you live in a cave. And I did live in a cave. I lived on a beach once, and I thought, this is the way I want to live. But I realised I actually have more things to do on this planet, so I learned to play in the capitalist system. I created a $600 million company by myself. I've created many companies. I understand that system. I can play in those games, but they are all toxic, is my experience. I thought I could play and stay above them, but honestly, it nearly killed me, and I'm really glad I got out when I did from those systems. So I'm not saying, again, everything about capitalism is bad. I'm part of that system where I believe we all are, as I said, but I think we have to look at the motives behind what most things are doing. And just because someone wants to make money out of something, that's not bad either. But is that balanced? Are they doing it in a balanced form? Academia or government doing it in a big form? When you're a big corporation and you have access to all of these tools, it is quite scary what happens. And for me, it's cannabis. Cannabis is breaking down the walls of all of these problems that we've had on this planet, and I think it is really affecting all of these different companies. In my bioplastics company, I was recently in Thailand where they've legalized cannabis, and Thailand is actually one of the biggest petrochemical producers on the planet. And some of the biggest petrochemical companies, they own hundreds of companies all over the world, including many in Australia. All of the mines that happen in here, they do loads of stuff here, and they take out all they're basically the people I used to consider super evil when I was young. I definitely don't consider them angels anymore, but I still see them as, some people, they're not doing as good as they can with their resources, we'll say. So I had the honour to actually go and meet some of the executives, and I thought these were going to be old people sitting behind their desk going, yeah, we make petrochemicals, we don't know anything about this plant cannabis, it's a risk. We worked that out 80 years ago, which is why we made that big campaign, which is why everyone thinks that cannabis is, it's got these big ball and chain on it. Everyone thinks cannabis is bad because it's got such a bad history. And I was shocked. And I want to finish on this kind of subject because I was shocked to find that the people I met were not 80-year-old white-haired people. They were 40-year-old next generation saying, my family have given me this business and I realised we fucked the earth and we've got to do something about this. And yes, we're interested in cannabis. How can we do that? So, there is hope. There is hope. There is hope in this planet. So again, I've chosen to relax from that big corporate system that I still have a few fingers in pies because I think it is worth the effort. But I've come back to what I originally believed, which is the way we make change are by the small things that we do. The absolute small things. When we walk past someone here at the festival, whether we can smile at them, whether we see someone drop something, can we pick it up from those? That is how I believe we can change the world, literally. So my small thing right now is offering the experience of this cannabis plant and the psychedelic experience to as many people as possible. And that's grown to me now basically training people to do that because I realize I can only help so many people in the limited time I have. So I created a training course, and why I could do that? Well, I've been involved with cannabis for 30 years professionally. I have a lot of friends in the cannabis industry around the world. I also have a lot of friends because of my work in psychedelics who are basically psychotherapists, doctors, professors, wonderful people that are here, vibration experts, yoga experts, cannabis people, as I said, lawyers, wonderful people who've all supported me in coming together as a community, and I believe that's why we're here. That's why these events are really important. That's why we're here to talk about these things. That's why we're here to explore these things. I'm not saying I've got everything right. I don't believe any of us have, otherwise, we'd be probably floating off the ground, and sometimes I feel like I'm floating off the ground, but not for long yet. So let's keep working together and grow as a community, and if it's something you can add to this story, well, let's talk about it. Let's get together, let's communicate. I'm here, everyone's here, let's have conversations. For me, I love hearing some of the amazing speakers that we've got here, but it's the conversations in between that are the most exciting bits. So thank you for being patient. One question over here and then one question over here. And we have plenty of time for questions and answers, so how may I help you?
What I wanted to say was one of the most beautiful, magical things about cannabis and the endocannabinoid system is that everything gets an endocannabinoid system. All of that, only insects for some reason don't get an endocannabinoid system. All animals, all nature, everything, which is some sort of beautiful connection.
Yeah, it's amazing because we don't have like a eucalyptoid system in our body to connect with all the and I love eucalypt trees, and I love many plants that exist here in nature. But for some reason, I didn't choose it. We literally have a lock and key mechanism that is built for cannabis. That is foundational to this is not, a fad, it's not a phase. In fact, I started off. It's a scientific fact. Thousands of years old. There's a history record as far back as we can go. So I don't doubt this is part of our future as well, and how we can evolve and how we can support each other as people. Thank you for your patience.
I have 3 questions. mosquitoes.
Okay.
But it's interesting that it sounds like mosquitoes can never get high. Because we're around them.
Oh,
It sounds like mosquitoes could never get high.
No.
So the first question I have is, which of these subtypes do you use for therapy? Do you use sativa, or do you choose it depending on the person?
Okay, so very common question, very good question. So I would skip back to the beginning of my talk, but basically at the beginning of my talk I talked about cannabis being 3 varieties, sativa, indica, and rudialis. But I also said, if you remember, there is no such thing as sativa. Okay, I call sativa broadleaf. I think that's a more technical term from all the cannabis experts, and I call indica narrowleaf. So you can call it sativa and indica. That's what most people are used to still. That's what people still read. It's not entirely accurate. And both of those, there is nothing on the left side and nothing on the right side. Everything is in the middle somewhere. Okay. So what do I use? Is must contain at least 20% THC. That's an average, okay? So for a plant, for an experience to go into a psychedelic experience. Now that's not completely accurate either, because it can be less, as I explained before, and that depends upon the other compounds. Now I am probably going to develop a cannabis psychedelic strain that will be available in Australia, or multiple cannabis psychedelic strains, and a brand of that. It's in progress. It's not something I wanted to do, and I offered it to so many people to do it, and they're like, no, I can't be bothered. I'm making loads of money. I'm like, okay, someone's got to do it then. So rather than answering the question, so I'll just take this one. It's usually a simple answer. But how am I going to make that? So I'm going to make that with, again, some significant amount of tetrahydrocannabinol, delta 9, in it, in a flower form that I will predominantly sell. I may sell vape distillates as well, or vape rosins. So vape rosins, I recommend the 2 best substances to consume from cannabis are either the flowers directly or the rosin. Rosin is basically a pressed terpenes. So you know, it's called rosin. Well, there's you can call it resin or rosin, but it's pressed basically, without any chemicals, without any distillates being used. So you don't use butane or hexane or all these other things. So they're the 2. And the reason I use rosins particularly is the same reason I use flowers, is because, coming back to the next part of the answer to your question, as I said, it's not a simple answer, is it comes down to the terpenes predominantly, okay? Does it also include the flavonoids and esters? And the esters probably a lot more than most people realise. So the esters within cannabis actually play a really big part, and there's not enough science there. So yes, I know I said I hate scientists in general. I don't hate scientists in general, I didn't say that. I actually love scientists, and we need more information still, and I support and I will fund scientists where I can to provide more information about esters. But there is enough science on the terpenes already, and the terpenes affect the experience in a great way. Now, you can say, and I won't go into it right now, but I'll say terpenes can affect you this way, or this way, or this way, and they can basically make you an experience where you feel really awake and wired, or they can make you really stoned and down in your body, you know, and there's everything in between. And when you go to a proper dispensary in Colorado and you meet someone who's really well trained in this, you can say, what's that variety do? They can say, well, it will take about 2 minutes and then you'll feel like this, and then for a little period you'll feel like this, and then you'll feel like that, then you might go like that, and then you might want something. I'm like, wow. And then when I first heard that, I'm like, you're making it up, man, you're a salesperson. But when I tried it, he literally, I don't know if it's placebo effect or what it was, but I found very much those experiences. So that's when I started studying it more, and I realized that is absolutely correct. So to understand what that does, you need a full certificate of analysis. In Australia, no one has to provide that certificate of analysis. All we have to do is say the THC and CBD quantities, which is why doctors who think they can prescribe it don't really know what they're prescribing, because they don't really have the analysis, and even if they did, I don't think they would understand it. So I'm doing my best to train as many doctors as I can so they can offer this kind of knowledge and understanding about what strains to use. Now, coming back to the psychedelic experience, because people come with different metabolisms, with different states of mind, needing different experiences, how do you get this one plant that can produce so many different experiences and benefits to fit so many different people who come from different reasons? How do you make those meet in the middle? Well, I've learned to trust the cannabis spirit and the cannabis plant for many different reasons. But one way I do that specifically in terms of varieties, I provide the most balanced form of all the terpenes. So usually when you'll go and buy a plant, you mentioned like something like myrcene is a very high terpene, beta-carotene is another terpene. You'll get usually a strain that's very high in myrcene and have a very particular smell. You'll get one that smells in beta-carotene, it has a very particular smell. They'll have very specific effects too. But if you balance those terpenes out to as many, what you don't do is put two beta-carotene strains together, there's no point. But you put a beta-carotene strain with a myrcene strain with a limonene strain, and you get the four major top terpenes mixed together on an average form, then you're going to get the whole plant experience. And that is another definition of whole plant experience, and it's so widely used whole plant entourage effect. It's like most people who say that have no idea what they're talking about, except that's what you need to do. It's like, yeah, well, what does that mean? 400 chemicals, how do you get 400 chemicals in what balance? You're talking about a whole plant. But I'm talking about it predominantly in the blend of terpenes and esters. And that will give most people a bunch of different experiences. You'll get the up of the THC. First of all, the cannabinoids in general, you get the up of the THC. You'll get the more grounded part of the CBD and anti-anxiety effects from the CBD. If you have CBN, so I like to include CBN, particularly in my blends. I have some cannabis buds here, which I grew in my garden, which, we're in a church, so Holy Sacrament if you want any. Some cannabis tea. Hey, it's raining cannabis, yeah, raining cannabis. So anyway, there's more cannabis. Hey! You can come and get some later, it's plenty more. These are very, sorry. That's why you came. I didn't know. You should have said you could have got that. You didn't have to wait. So this I grew and is really high in CBN. So I grew it particularly high in CBN. So CBN is the more of the sedative part of the cannabis, which is actually quite good because I don't want to excite people too much. I don't want to give them a full, I can really send people way out there using cannabis, but I like to give them a balanced experience so that they have the opportunity to use it for what it's best at, which is gently taking you in to the psychedelic experience. And when you talk about cannabis, you think, oh, it makes you slow, man. Well, it actually does a little bit, and in a good way, where when you're going in the psychedelic experience, you can actually be a little bit detached. It's not as detached as like ketamine is from the body, a complete line missed out, but it is in a form where you can actually see memory and trauma, and you go, yeah, do I want to come into that? And it does affect time. We talk about altered perception of time. In fourth dimensional state, you can call it what you like, but that's you get what I'm talking about. So that is part of what cannabis does, and the CBN particularly helps with that. So I like to balance those particular cannabinoids, I like to balance out all the terpenes, and you can do that, but generally there's not one strain that does that. It's a bit of a challenge. So when people come for a psychedelic experience, I do it completely legally, just to be clear. So you have to bring your own medicine to me. So ideally, I can't supply medicine at this moment in time. And so I can recommend these kind of varieties. So I can say, yeah, bring a sativa and an indica blend, and bring a few blends. So ideally, people have got a few different varieties at home. Like my friends I visited around here, they've got like all these jars stacked up on there. I'm like, yeah, you know what to do. So you bring them all, and I basically mix them depending on the COA. So I help them to their official dose. And that's part of what makes it legal, is that I'm not actually supplying them, I'm holding that space and that experience. So does that answer the question? Is it a cannabis sativa or cannabis indica? Let's come back to your question.
That does answer the question.
Okay.
So in terms of, we know that it's legal for certain medical conditions, but at the moment it is not actually legal to prescribe cannabis for depression or PTSD.
You can do, yeah, absolutely. Any doctor can prescribe for whatever they want now. It's pretty much off-label prescription. Though APRA have been been hitting doctors a little bit recently because the prescription rates have been going up so high. Because some people are going to say, I've got a sneeze, can I have cannabis? Like, yeah, sure. It's like, no problem.
My other question is, as you know, MDMA is legal for PTSD and psilocybin for depression, although we know that they help all of those. But in your experience, are there any particular conditions that it's better for, or what range of conditions do you think it may help? Psychiatric conditions?
Well, I did list those psychiatric conditions earlier, like depression, anxiety, pain relief. They're the predominant ones.
PTSD?
PTSD, absolutely, yes. It's been used for that. Just to be clear, I'm not a doctor, I'm not giving any medical advice, but these are the things that I've seen people using cannabis predominantly for around the world. And there are specific strains for those particular ailments that are better, more high in one or another. So I'm not going to give you a list of those right now, but if you want to check in later, and if there's tell me one for something specific, then I can give you a more specific answer. But yeah, they absolutely help. Now, again, like all psychedelics, cannabis is not a magic drug that you take cannabis and you're automatically fixed. You have to do the work, like with any plant. But the cannabis plant is working with you, and it's a gentle plant, so you get to work with it in the kind of ways that I'm trying to colour for you. So you get to see it's gentle. You can leave it. You have the agency to leave the psychedelic experience. It's completely legal for you to use. I mean, these allow us things that have never existed before in the psychedelic realm. So
I can support that by saying, I took cannabis for pain,
Yep.
and I can say that what you're saying is so true because I probably took too much, but one of the biggest life lessons I ever had was with cannabis. It was almost traumatic. It was with me for almost a month, but it was well worth it. Spirits talked to me saying, David, now we've got you, and we've got all the time in the world to teach you this lesson. And it was just, about personal responsibility and power of choice. And just, and it was like DMT before too. It was quite, it was tough though.
Yeah.
Quite
So,
gentle, but yes.
well, so
absolutely.
it is often tough and not gentle. Again, if you don't come with it with the right intentions. Again, with any psychedelic, it's all about the mindset that you come with it for. So if you are not prepared for that, then you can be knocked around. And just to be clear, most people that I treat for a psychedelic experience half of them I'll say have never had cannabis before. Most of the other half of them though had a cookie or too much once, twice, maybe 5 times, and this doesn't work for me, it's not my plant, okay? But eventually they come back and go, oh, this guy's done it for 30 years, maybe he knows a little bit something about it. I'm like, maybe I do, so feel free if you want, if you're called. Let me reintroduce you into a respectful relationship with this plant. And that's all I'm doing. I'm just literally going, here's your hand, come and meet each other. It's nice and comfortable. Have some orange juice after, and and be comfortable with that. When you do it that way, you can have those DMT-like experiences. You can have those really strong visuals and go into deep trauma, or whatever you've got, or nothing, or just the evolution of your own self. Whenever you're going in it for, with a clear intention, and come out the other side in a way that is not harmful. And it's not addictive. It's not, it's not even psychologically addictive. I don't know about you, but some people, I guess, I have met, there are charlatans in every industry, including the psychedelic world, I will say very clearly, who say, I hold circles, come and sit in my circle, and we'll do it next week, and come next week, and it's fine, and we can, and people go deeper thinking that's really helpful for themselves. I've seen people delusioned for years doing that, and I always see them crash at the end of it, because it's all about integration. Those protocols, you can't miss a step. That means if you don't fully integrate your experience, and truly integrate, not think, oh yeah, I did a journal, I wrote about it, I'm done now, the plant will eventually tell you. And cannabis, as gentle as it is, it will still tell you, but it is gentle.
It's something going to teach you. You're going to learn.
Yeah.
You're the one that's going to do it.
How big a dose are we talking about? And is this like the bun that the yogis drink?
No, good question. So again, I don't use edibles, just to be really clear. I don't use topicals. When you consume cannabis in that way, 2 things happen. One is that it actually goes through different pathways in your body. So it doesn't convert to Delta 9. You don't get the Delta 9 THC experience. You get a Delta 11 THC experience. Now, that's not bad, but it's different is the point. So you have a different experience overall in general when you have an edible. Edibles also last for at least 4 hours and can last for days if you take too much. So again, dosage is a really important question. And I'll come back to answering the question directly, but before we get there, understand what are you dosing. So this is why I like two things. I like smoking or vaping. Now, preferably vaping. I only use vaping myself, unless there's no choice. A nice, quick and easy smoke, a little bit, pure bit of cannabis. Hold the heat from it as little as possible. Consume it because it will hit you very quickly. You'll know the effect, and it will last for about an hour. You know, maybe give more or less, and then it will run out much quickly after that 1 hour, depending on how much you have again. If you take an edible, completely different, and that completely depends on your metabolism, as well as the kind of cannabis you took, as well as the dosage you take. So for edibles, I give no advice. I just generally don't recommend it unless you're experienced with this plant medicine. In terms of having a cannabis psychedelic experience, I find that really fascinating, and I trust the plant spirit. And I trust the plant spirit so much that when people come and say, so how much should I take? I say, I basically, in the rituals that I talked about earlier, I give people eight opportunities to imbibe the medicine, okay? I put about, we'll just give you an idea, between 25 and 100 milligrams of THC basically a bag, a vapor bag. So people will have between 25 and 100 milligrams, and I will give them the opportunity to make the choice themselves. So that means that you have as much as you want. You can have a little breath, or you can have a big breath. Some people just have a few breaths, and that's all they need. Some people have an entire balloon and say more after, you know? And everyone's different, and I really trust that it doesn't matter whether you have even less than 25 milligrams or you have 100 milligrams, and you really don't need 100 milligrams of this, you will have a true psychedelic experience when used in the protocol I described. So if you just have 25 milligrams, you get high, you get stoned, it is very different experience. So I really, again, cannabis comes with all this stigma and all this is what cannabis does to you. So I am being really clear here, and I will communicate it many times. You will see this and hear this, hopefully many times around, so I will be more public about this. But cannabis and cannabis psychedelic experience are very different. This is a very respectful way of using a plant that hasn't been used since before capitalism. Remember, before that time when it was actually truly used in this spiritual, medical use. So all I'm going is coming back from what we can learn from history, from my friends who've studied. My friends own the biggest cannabis museums in the world. There's only a few of them, and they literally own it, where they collected all the history, everything ever existed on cannabis from a long time ago, and they put it together. They've taught me, these are the people I grew up with who have taught me how it was used. I studied the latest protocols for psychedelic medicines and brought these together. So this is what I've had here. So,
what are your thoughts on the irradiation of cannabis exported in the country?
Cannabis is not irradiated when it's brought in the country unless it has some fungus, molds, or insects or disease.
Don't they have to pass GMP standards, have to be irradiated, particularly when they come from?
No, they do not have to be irradiated. They can be irradiated if there's a reason for them to be irradiated. Irradiation costs money, thankfully, so therefore there has to be a really good reason to irradiate cannabis. So generally,
my experience is that when the CLAs are done here, for cannabis that's imported from, say, Canada, for it to pass it out, you can't have moles in it, so then another bacteria and microorganisms. So they irradiate it so that it passes, so they don't lose the money. So if I buy $500,000 worth of cannabis from a Canadian company over there, I don't want to lose my money and have that cannabis confiscated because
in those examples, it will have to be irradiated. So it's the same with everything. So I'm into wellness. I'm into eating as close to home as possible. I'm into growing my own fucking cannabis. So you want the best quality cannabis? So we didn't talk about quality of cannabis. This is another question. This is different from what variety, different to what dosage. All really important questions. Quality is just as important. The problem is teaching people quality of cannabis. You need to have special tools, and you need to understand smell. You need to study smell. Now, I can teach all these things. It's all part of the facilitator's training course. Is the basics of all of that. But ultimately, what it comes down to, the summary, is that you need to have as fresh cannabis as you possibly can. That's the number one most important thing, really is, because all of the terpenes all dissipate really quickly, longer than the shelf life they give it even. sadly. So really the idea is within 3, maybe 6 months maximum from when it was cured is when you should be consuming your cannabis. Now, that means you can't store it for years. I mean, you can, but it turns into CBN basically, which is good for a particular use, but it's not, you're not getting all the benefits of that plant. But that's for the ingredients to make sure you've got all the actual molecules that you needed in it. But then there's the mold, there's pests, there's fungus, and you can't see them with your naked eye. You need a magnifying glass. So when you look at cannabis, that smells nice, you can't do that. So if you really want to know, you have to learn how to look for a magnifying glass with white light and blue light. Blue light to see the insects and the spider mites, white light to see whether it's ripe or not ripe. So you need to be able to see those things. And I know that's really hard, a lot of information for most people to deal with. So forget all of that. The best way to train to know if a cannabis strain is good for you, smell it. Does that smell good? Yeah, great. Your body knows it all, So if something smells good, go for that. If it doesn't, don't do that. One question over here.
I'm obviously a big advocate in growing your own medicine.
Yep, great.
And I am a medicinal cannabis consultant. And one thing I tell people, and I don't know if it's true, but I just heard it, and I'm going with it, that if you put the seeds in your mouth, hold them in your mouth, instead of waiting them for like 10 or 20 minutes, the actual cannabis, the seed picks up your DNA and will grow according to what you need.
Yeah,
That's beautiful, isn't it?
Well, I've heard that from about all seeds that you grow. Well, there's Anastasia. Go and read the Anastasia books about that. So that's what that's about. Nothing to do with cannabis, but to do with all seeds in general. It's a good fact. Yep. I do that anyway, but I don't know if it works or not. No science that I'm aware of to prove that.
And 2 questions.
We've got to be quick because Julian, who's an amazing speaker, is next. So, Julian, you kick me off when you're in. Quick.
You mentioned pressed, so we're talking about charis and hashish.
So charis is not pressed. Charis is sieved and rubbed. Charis is not sieved. It's just rubbed from the plant. Hashish is sieved and rubbed. So no, rosin is different, it's pressed. There's a rosin presses, so you can research them. So they use a bit of heat because they use pressure. So pressure to make them, you can buy small rosin presses.
And second question, you mentioned...
But you don't need to, flowers are fine, just add natural, from the plant, perfect. Get a dry vape, very, very simple, don't have to get complicated. Yep.
The New England Journal of Medicine we're talking about, that Marcia said that you could no longer trust... Am I not correct that she was talking about, because of all the misinformation over COVID, that's actually what she was referring to?
No, that was pre-COVID. That was pre-COVID statement. That statement was taken from her pre-COVID, but it's probably because of all the different data.
Of scientific papers.
Yes.
Yep, first.
Go to the next person.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, so cannabis seems to be, as many psychedelic plants seem to open a portal to other dimensions.
Yes.
And people have had experiences of positive entities as well as negative entities.
Yeah.
So when you are facilitating, do you have any rituals and do you have,
Yes.
I mean, it appears that the same plant can invite both positive entities but also negative entities. What do you
Yes.
do about that?
It's a good question, and I probably don't have time to go into that now. I will say I've written these books here. There's 6 books on cannabis psychedelics. There's the coursework book on a facilitator's training guide. You're welcome to have a quick look at these, which we'll have to do outside if you want to have a look. I'm happy to answer questions and maybe talk to you about that during the week.
He teaches you something valuable.
Yeah, but thank you. It's later. Yeah.
I want to thank you for your work, first of all. It's really cool. I'm from Canada.
Yeah.
So you've got more dispensaries than you have liquor stores.
You do,
and
yes.
I've never really been able to have a conversation about cannabis as psychedelic with people. Just because the stigma, like you said, that give me kind of long munchies.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you mentioned cannabis spirit, and I know there's a lot of talk in other psychedelics about the psychedelic having almost a consciousness of itself.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about your experience with cannabis, whether you feel it does have some sort of ancient kind of spirit or consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so 100%. I kind of had one slide up there saying that cannabis is my teacher, my guide, my boss. Like sometimes I try and I've had enough. God, this is hard. I don't want to do business anymore. And then immediately it comes and it literally brings things to my door when I fully give up. I literally have, I know I've given up now, as in I'm like subservient to this plant spirit. I feel this plant spirit. I don't like have conversations in my head with this plant spirit, but occasionally it comes like, no, you're doing this. I'm like, okay, I guess so. Like this whole cannabis psychedelic thing is because even in places like Canada where cannabis is so widespread, it's still not being used in the most respectful way by most people, we'll say. Not, sure, some people are, certainly in America some people are, but predominantly this is nearly world news, really, and we all should be going, wow, we can actually do this today and practice with these plants openly. There's no other plant can we actually talk about all the psychedelic information and details openly. And that, for me, is really exciting because I'm a conduit for this spirit, plant, whatever you want to call it. I try not to put too many words in there because people all have their own opinions and judgments on what those names mean. But, here I am, talking in a church, talking about this, preaching to you. Yeah. Last question. Sorry, one lady here hasn't asked a question, please.
As a mom of teenagers,
yes.
my son has been, very attracted to cannabis.
Yes.
And as a responsible guardian of him, I'd like to sort of ask you whether there is information about supporting him.
Yes.
And also just some sort of information to help him because obviously knowledge is power.
Yes.
Just in relation to the neural pathways and how
Yes.
that can stunt.
Yes.
I don't know if you can elaborate on that.
Yes, a little bit, but I can say that if you look for papers of brain development, neurology and teenagers with cannabis, there are papers that describe the effects. I've done that to similar mums to yourself. I'm a father. My son has passed that stage, and I'm like, my son, he knows what I've been doing all my life. He knows that he sees me traveling all over the world, going to talking about cannabis everywhere. And yet he listens to me, how much? 0 when he was a teenager. I'm like, what the heck? I told you when you're 21, you can smoke with me, we can go and do all psychedelics together. Come on, can't wait for you to be 21. By the time he's 16, he was go way into drugs in a negative way, in the way that I don't preach. And I told him very clearly, I gave him the science. I literally printed out science papers and I sat him down. You want dinner? Well, you got to read this first. It didn't work at all for me. So, which is why when I said over 21s only, what I now do is I say to people like yourself, is if you bring your son to me, I will give him a different experience with cannabis, which includes all the ritual aspects and showing him how maybe it can be used. And I'm not promoting cannabis, I prefer he didn't take any cannabis. But if you have no choice, as in I didn't have a choice, I wish someone could actually show him some respect for the plant. That's all I can deal with today. But I'm happy I'm here for the rest of the weekend, so let's talk. And thank you for listening.
Is there any more questions? Just ask his AI bot.
Oh, yes. They're not for sale here. All my books are free online. I'm now giving them away free to anyone here. They're not free online. Just message me and say, hey, I saw you at the conference. You said to give me a free book. So, you can look at these, or you can buy them on Amazon if you prefer, physical book. They're all available on Amazon, but they're all free if you want. Help yourself to anything you may find, any sacrament you may find in the church. Be share. Be nice. Yeah. But is it possible to wait a few minutes? Just so I can clear the stage from this guy and make sure I can. Thanks for the extra time.
That's all right. I've got
I want to hear your talk. I want to hear your talk. I'm really interested in your experience too. I've been following you for many years, but...
got this one.
Oh, no, I don't. Oh, really?